Welcome back to the Raven Chronicles with Moonin and Hugin, or Jon and Jay, as we like to call ourselves every day.
Woo!
Today, we have a fantastic guest. Rhonda Sawchuk is joining us. She was originally from Dawson Creek, BC, spent 20 years in the oil patch, and she dipped her toes in organized crime for a while. So here she is sitting down with a couple ex-cops to talk about life and wisdom and where she's going now. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
All right, we're back from that super intro video and so on and so forth. We have Rhonda with us. Rhonda, I've
Hi,
seen your
Rhonda.
pedigree. Okay.
Bye.
And it's a long few pages, right? And
Mm.
people don't necessarily, and the one that don't know you and the one that know you, it's totally fine. They're gonna hear again your little story because I want to hear your pedigree for the one who don't know you. Can you share that with us?
Sure. So I live in southern BC right now, and I somewhat just retired from the oil field after spending 20 years working as a contract safety in some of the most remote, rugged areas. Spent months, well, years in remote work camps on pipeline and facility. But I decided I was going to take a turn and I wanted to get into mental health because I definitely saw the lack of awareness and support with mental health within those industries. And I really saw them starting to struggle, right? So I really wanted to bring awareness to that. And then it just took off from there. Now I'm in school getting my licensed registered therapist. And I've started an online platform now where I'm connecting with people such as yourself, who is now on a mission to, tell their stories and try to help people. The world is kind of in a dark place right now. There's a lot of mental health struggles.
There really is. And you
Mhm.
know what's really cool, and most people don't know this, is that you've come to this moment in your life uh like trial by fire.
Oh, yes.
You've got a very interesting past that we kind of just hinted on. So I use the term organized crime at the beginning of this,
Mm.
and it seems as though you've done like the mountain deep valley kind of lifestyle until you had an aha moment or you had a breakthrough. So
Yeah.
give
Yeah.
us a little rundown of how. So obviously, Rhonda Sawchuk got into organized crime for some reason. Maybe it was, tied to the oil patch because there is some trouble there with drugs and gambling and a whole host of other things. So tell us briefly what you can. We're no
Mhm.
pressure here. Tell us briefly how your life turned to the oil patch, which is very male dominated,
Mhm.
and then that you also sort of moonlighted or actually got heavily involved in some ways in organized crime. Tell us your story.
Yeah. So it was actually the organized crime that came first. And
Okay.
then when I finally got my shit together, the oil field for me was a place where I could go and make a lot of money, be accepted because like you said, it's a brotherhood, it's a male dominated industry and they don't do criminal record checks out there. And like
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, there is a lot of really good men and women out there and they're extremely good at what they do. But it just was a place for me to navigate, and learn some new skills. But the organized crime, like you don't just wake up one day and say, hey, I just want to be part of this organization. It's a slow trickle. And I was always one of those people that said, like, trouble always finds me. Why do I always attract trouble? But you're absolutely right. There was things about me and the way I grew up. There was a lot of childhood wounds,
Mhm.
a lot of stuff that was completely overlooked. And now I can look back and understand all about the nervous system that when we are dysregulated like that, we're going to go out into the world and we're going to attract the similarities and the familiarities, what's living inside of us. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
I was always like an adrenaline junkie. I was, always rode bikes, drove a lot of souped up cars, just a thrill seeker. So of course, when I moved to the big city, I started attracting like-minded individuals,
Mm-hmm.
and those like-minded individuals had, some side hustles, and then it just kind of took off from there. Right. But the use of drugs and alcohol didn't, obviously help either. Right. Because once you get a taste for that, then the margins get blurred, the boundaries get blurred. So now all of a sudden you're selling drugs, you know, and now you're going to these parties and whatever. And then it takes off from there. And what happened to me is I actually got arrested in a grow op, a very big one. It was definitely funded by organized crime. And I was looking at doing 3 to 5 years for that, because during that time there was a zero tolerance. And the judge in court, he looked right at me and said, "Young lady, I'm setting an example out of you." So clink, off I went. And because I came across as being very stoic and that I could kind of handle those types of situations, when I got out, well, I only served 18 months. But when I got out, it put me on the radar now for higher level organized crime bosses. So then the calling card came. And then it just took off from there. And then it was like 10 years of my life.
Well, because you had built up a resume, right?
Exactly that. Like they say, sometimes penitentiary can be like the university.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because you got yourself warmed up a little bit on the street, and then you had to prove yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, so obviously that was the early part of your life, because then you said then came the oil patch afterwards. So were you out of crime by that time?
Yes. I mean, I still had a lot of contacts and whatnot, but I still had kind of one toe in the door, I guess you could say. But I had enough of that. Like my life was absolute chaos. Like it had tanked. It hit an all-time low, mostly with the addictions, right? Because that fast lane has a quick stop.
Yeah, we all know what that stop ends up being, don't we?
Yeah, it's either death, addictions, you know, or worse.
Yeah. Yeah, it's 200 miles an hour into a brick wall, right, John?
Absolutely.
Like we've seen this.
Yeah, we talked about it.
Both being ex-cops, we've seen this in so many people. So yeah, you're absolutely correct on that. John, you were gonna go. I think I cut you off.
Memory flew out, man. I don't have memories, so it's not important right now. That's all good.
I'll start the questions off then, because something occurred. You obviously, I mean, sometimes prison or a jail sentence can be enough to kind of shake somebody out of their, no offense, but their stupidity. Or
yeah, it was stupidity.
Maybe, you know, that's kind of a brash way of saying it. I shouldn't have gaslit you like that. But anyways, what was the aha moment? What happened? Was there some sort of critical mass explosion, for lack of a better term? Was there something that occurred in your life that the light bulb finally switched?
Yeah, recognizing the soul sickness.
Right.
Yeah. And and like the thing is, though, I did hit rock bottom. Like the addictions took over, and I didn't go to rehab. I probably should have, because I might have gotten my shit together a lot sooner. But however, I did manage to kind of dig myself out of that trench. And then, of course, what do you do then, right? Because you've lived this life of absolute luxury. People don't say no to you. There's nothing that you can't do, and there's nothing that you can't have. The money is ridiculous, and that is an addiction in itself. Right. So for me now, I tried a minimum wage job. I was at Canadian Tire for 6 months, and I had about $50 a month left over for spending money. And it was like, what? This is not going to work. Right. Because I still kind of had that soul sickness, like that material gain. Right. But so then I found a life in the oil field, which, by the way, pays like incredibly well, but it also kind of steals your soul. Right. Because now you're on the road, 7 days a week. We were working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week for months on end. I mean, one time I did 96 straight days in camp. I never even seen the lights of town. But I mean, being in military, you're no stranger to that either. But the challenges that brings.
Well, if you're alone, it makes sense, right? Like, because I looked at it. I looked to remove myself from, the income of the Veterans Affair, because it's probably a fracture of what the oil pays. But family-wise, quality of life, I think that's more the term, right? The quality of life, this is what you have to look for, the fulfillment and so on and so forth. And I think that's what coaching gives you, right? Yes. It gives you that wisdom that you can share and give to others who actually goes to traumas, who problem or whatever that is, right? And I think the oil is a big thing in this as well. I live in a town where it's a bunch of oil people, a bunch of them, and all the guys says the same thing. They have every type of person on the oil field. You have the geek, you have the bro trains every day and injects to get bigger, and I mean I've seen that in the military by all means.
Yeah.
You have the cokehead by all means, and
Lots of cocaine.
Yeah.
Lots of cocaine.
And you have the big truck, big toys, big everything that pays off. Welcome to Alberta, right?
Yeah, I just sold my big truck.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I actually just sold my big truck too. Couldn't afford the damn
33-inch tires, the
Oh, yeah.
lift, like all the gadgets. But I just looked at that truck one day and went, oh my God, like I gotta work now to pay for that. I'm in school. I'm a student.
Oh gosh. And with gas in Ontario being almost $2 a liter, I was tired of filling up a 7.3 liter V8 every week.
Yeah. So, I mean, and then for me, like I recognize those struggles in everybody in the oil field. And not only was I experiencing it firsthand as a safety, I stopped looking at policies and procedures. Like that really started to annoy me sometimes, right? Because that's where I started kind of getting into people's psyche. Like what is it about a person that's going to take a risk? Right. So rather than, looking at policies and procedures and saying, oh my God, you forgot to dot your I and cross your T, I was approaching incidents more like, hey, buddy, how's things at home? Like, is everything okay with the wife? Are your kids okay in school? And when you start building the rapport with these guys, the men and the women, they start to open up to you and realize that, hey, we're just two human beings having a conversation right now. Let's just put these like OH&S books aside right now. Let's how are you doing? And 9 times out of 10, their life was tanking. Like it was tanking, so then you wonder why people are out there taking risks because they don't give a crap at that point. They're giving up.
There's a desperation that actually it's great that you said that because I was prepared today. So I have questions written down.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask because you've been in a lot of situations. So you've been able to, like you said, kind of learn the psyche of humans, by way of your experience in life. What is the common thread, Rhonda? You've seen people at their worst. You've seen people at the top of their game in organized crime. You've seen people at the top of their game in the oil patch where you can make $250,000 in a year as a layperson. But you also see an immense amount of pain.
Yes.
Right? Nobody turns to drugs and becomes a drug addict because they're having a great time and their life is awesome. And I don't think people wake up or are born and think, I'm going to get into organized crime. There's something common about them. And I think you're kind of hinting at it. There's this common thread. And I'd like you have seen this firsthand. So tell me about it. What is that common thread that you've seen?
Well, I'll say it kind of on a more spiritual side, right? Because it is a soul sickness. And the thing is, like, whether or not it's life of organized crime or in the oil field, we're all like trying to get this material gain, right? This material gain, which is in sole interest of ourself. So like even in the oil field and a lot of construction stuff, like I'm not anti-pipeline by any means, right? But I mean, it's kind of like what we're doing, things to the planet. We're living far away from our soul's purpose. We're kind of missing the mark. So all of this material gain at the cost of what? At the cost of not meeting the needs of our fellow man. It's all this like me, the ego, individuality. And the thing is that comes with a cost. That comes with a big, big price, because we ignore the simple truth that we're all connected to the same source. Right. So it's like we commit against our fellow man. We're ideally committing against ourselves.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So my turn, Jason, my turn. Okay. So what I was looking into when you said that, and there's a few things because I listened to your other podcasts, the appearance that you did mention in the past Gabor Mate, which obviously he brings about trauma, but what he also brings is about childhood trauma, which being related from his point of view as ADHD.
Yes.
Right. So, which he's the one who started kind of that little family of saying ADHD is based on, well, this is where the complex PTSD would be from as well.
Right.
The ADHD is kind of kicking in, which they're very close, and so on and so forth. So, I'm curious about your intake on neurodivergent, because a lot of things you mentioned already, what I've seen in it is neurodivergent. Some people who actually can shut off some part of themselves for sacrifice and then just carry on because they have to do it and it's bigger than themselves, which we see a lot in the oil field, right? By all means, there's a lot of people who buy their big things and so on, but I know a lot of people who would sacrifice their own happiness for their family, which is honorable by all means, at the price of their own family, right?
Yeah.
Because they're missing out on their friends. So their family members. Now, the question is would we change things if we would have taught our new generation to, instead of looking for intake outside, that the intake is inside?
Absolutely. Right? Yeah. 100%. And that's what happens when we experience trauma, especially in the developmental years, right? We adapt by these coping mechanisms. So if it's like super hyper focused on something to the point where it's almost like OCD, or we just can't focus. I mean, our nervous systems are completely dysregulated, right? So we become either hyper vigilant or completely shut down. So, I mean, there's a lot of, I think, mental health conditions that come from just early childhood development during those, like if there's trauma. For instance, like what example could I use? Like even like the hypervigilant. Like people don't understand that your nervous system, like the whole nervous system actually is like electromagnetic, which now gives other people those cues, which are very subliminal, very subconscious, which now creates that child who has been at the hands of a predator, maybe during childhood, is actually now on the radar for more of them. Right. They become hypervigilant to the point now where they're attracting that frequency now, like where, and they say predators can actually pick up on that because it's very subliminal cues. Is that kind of where we were going with that?
Well, it is. I was just curious about your intake.
It can go anywhere, which is awesome. So yeah, it's awesome. I love it. Yeah.
And what you brought about the electromagnetic, which is very interesting, and it's a therapy that is not talked about often because it costs a machine and not pills. It's RTMS. Right, which one of the side of your brain is more driven for depression, and the other one is more driven for anxiety. So you're gonna have shock for X amount of times, an amount of pain, and so on, and which works weirdly enough, right?
Yeah,
so you're totally right with that that electronics,
and we also have to remember too that when you experience trauma, the prefrontal cortex kind of goes offline. And that's your CEO. That's like your logic, your emotional regulation, the reasoning, like that is the CEO of the brain. And then the amygdala will go online, which is your fight, flight, freeze. And sometimes, sorry, go ahead, Jason.
It's your emotional center. Yeah.
Yeah. And people don't understand that when a child is experiencing high levels of trauma, when their brain is developing, sometimes that is something that doesn't just go away.
Yeah, it's strange. So you guys have both touched on something that I was trying to get to, and we danced around it because I know that you're into the spirituality part, Rhonda, because you and I we crossed paths probably because of that.
Yes.
And we've had some conversations behind the scenes about the use of plant medicines to heal from certain things. The common thread when you're talking about this materialism and people that are soul sick, trauma and early childhood abuse seems to be the common thread I was thinking of. Now, I'm wondering if you're willing to share. I've shared a little bit of my story, and there's two pieces to this. I have found that people who are abused or experience a traumatic childhood, they come to a point in their life where you can literally tip one way or the other. And I danced a fine balance of that growing up, where I ended up in law enforcement, but I could have ended up on the other side of that line.
Right.
And it's just this imaginary line in the sand where you go one way or the other. But I think the common thread is trauma. It's abuse. You know, you see people and you've got to empathize with them because you see something in them that is hurting. And I'm sure
Yes.
that you experienced all of this. And there, did you get to spirituality through that? Did you get to it because of your own abuse? Did you find something in your past that brought you to this point where you originally tipped one way and then you came
Yeah.
back the other way, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I was always kind of a spiritual person. However, like the addictions and that trauma, like that puts you into a spiritual emergency.
Mm.
So then that's where like the dark side can come in, right?
Yeah,
But it's still
absolutely.
it's a spiritual warfare in my eyes. And yeah, there was a couple aha moments for me in when I was in the trenches of that lifestyle. And that was one day my friend came by and took me to church. And I'm not religious. However, that day was a day which left a huge imprint on me. Like I could say that I definitely felt the Holy Spirit that day. And I believe in all the ascended masters. Like I believe in all of it, right? It's a matter of going up the mountain, but many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So, but going back to the church, that day I did a shift. There was something in me that shifted, that I realized that there was something much greater than I am, like, and that there was hope. And you mentioned hope. And all of these ladies came over to me and they put their hands on me and they started to pray for me. And I was so overwhelmed with emotion. And that day gave me hope that there was community and that there was people that could see me for being just a human and not like a criminal or a drug addict. Mind you, it wasn't the TSN turning point, however, but it did create the shift. And then just practicing spirituality. I love the indigenous practices. I'm very close to elders. I've done some native sweats. I'm really into the drumming, the powwows, all of that. That started to evoke a lot of emotion and transformation in me. And then when I went and sat with ayahuasca, that was the game changer.
Mm.
Yes. Yes.
You
But
did it
that
where
was
in Peru? Did you do a Peru or?
well, yeah, my shaman is 2 decades in Peru. Yeah.
Okay.
And in Costa Rica, definitely. And I do believe in those medicines, but they're sacred medicines, and I don't believe that they should be in the hands of just anybody.
Agreed.
Yeah. John, have you ever had an opportunity to use plant medicines in any way other than cannabis? Have you ever used any of the psychedelic plant medicines?
No, I did
No.
pills before. And I mean, it's funny, Rhonda, you said about the house thing, because before joining the military, I work under a table and got it. This is funny because it's so long, probably 20 years ago. Let's go with that. I work in that store where they were selling everything for grow up.
Oh,
And it was
probably
called,
seen you.
God, no, in Quebec, right? It was just French, so probably not. But it
They
was
were
called,
from there.
yeah. It was the best weed. Okay, don't be. But anyhow, but I remember this, and I had to switch there, right? I was like, the one day I walked in front of the recruiting center. I had no idea. My parents never told me about military. We did not watch TV about military.
Yeah.
Did not watch anything about Canadian. It was Quebec and Quebec Power. And I just walked in and I was like, okay, this is what I have to do. Hurry. And then things change, right? I think you do take a switch one day and you have the choice. I mean, the road will be rocky if you don't listen, or it's going to be a bit smoother. I think both road would have been rocky, but it is what it is, right? Question for you on this aspect, on the aspect of the road of, the breakthrough and so on and so forth. The plant medicine, I did pills. I saw my friends on mushroom, which was extremely funny. But no, I never used more than this. I mean, with the military, we were tested like every 6 months, right? In special force. It was my dream work. So I was not going to ruin that. And the weed at that time, didn't touch it like since I was probably 14.
Yeah.
Right. Like I started to use weed now because I sleep with it. That's it. What I would love to try, I don't want that word because I cannot say
ayahuasca. Grandmother. Just call her grandmother Aya, because it is like having a grandmother.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I have a bunch of friends. Yeah. Go ahead.
I've heard it called Mother Ayahuasca. That's
Yeah.
sort of how it's been described
Yeah.
to me in certain
Yeah.
circles. Yeah.
You know, and a lot of people that haven't experienced the plant medicine, like I will never call them a drug because these are actually sacred medicines. And I can see why that the indigenous have been using them for thousands of years.
Mhm.
However, there is a lot of pop-up retreats now with these so-called shamans that have taken like an 8-week course and they're like, I'm a shaman. I am going to pour medicine and hold ceremony. And that is not something I would recommend to anybody.
Mhm.
I mean, this medicine is so powerful. It will rip your life apart and grab you by the ankles and turn you upside down and shake everything loose that's deep in your psyche that you've been either suppressing or repressing. So it's not for everybody because it's extremely jarring, I would like to call it. And if you don't have really good integration, it could actually make things worse.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree,
it can
Rhonda.
really make things worse. However, these medicines, people are walking in there and clearing and curing years of like pain manifestations, depression resistant drugs. It's like cleaning people up that way as well. And then the trauma is like processed at a deep cellular level. And I'm a living testimony of it. I mean, it was one of the scariest, most challenging situations I've ever been in because of the organized crime. I had a really greasy residual fingerprint on my energy body, I would like to call it. And my whole experience in that ceremony space was so dark.
Mm.
It was
So
so dark.
I want to this is going in a different direction that I had originally thought, but I love the spiritual part of this because it doesn't have to just be the things that we wrote down. So let's just keep going with it.
Oh no,
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah.
cover all of it.
Yeah,
Okay?
absolutely.
Let's do it.
So plant medicine
Mhm.
is obviously you have to tread lightly because we're talking about substances that are still currently illegal, right?
Yeah, which is
Um,
really unfortunate though.
It really is. It's kind of a sad thing because, you know,
Mm.
you've got the University of California, you've got Johns Hopkins, University of
Yes.
Toronto. There's a dozen or more
Yeah.
universities
Gabor
across.
Mate is an advocate for
He
ayahuasca.
is. He helps to
Yep.
host. He helps to host ceremonies.
Mhm.
I've experienced these, not Mother Ayahuasca.
Mhm.
I've never gotten an opportunity to experience that. And I feel like what I've learned is that you're called to it anyways. So I guess when I'm ready, I'll be at a ceremony.
The medicine
Uh,
finds you. They do say
yeah,
that. Yeah.
exactly. So psilocybin and DMT are
Mhm.
the plant medicines that I have experienced. And it's not been an organized situation. It
Mhm.
was something that I created a ceremony for myself with. But I want to just sort of echo what you said. This is something that you shouldn't take lightly.
No,
Jon mentioned, you know, he's seen his friends on mushrooms
it
laughing.
was
Okay, well,
funny. Yeah.
yeah, recreational mushrooms is sort of a bone of contention that I have.
It can be
Um,
it can be a dumpster fire though, you know.
it can be, yeah.
Oh
You have
yeah.
to be, you really need to be responsible for these things. So I just
Mhm.
want to put that out there because we're on a podcast where there could be influence or inspiration out there. So please, if you're listening, please
Mhm.
know that if you're interested in using plant medicine for this kind of reason, for improving your mental well-being, your spirituality, your connection to life, make sure you do your homework, make sure you study
Yes.
what you're
Yeah.
doing, take some time to learn, make sure
Mhm.
you're prepared properly. There's a whole host of steps that you should take, you know,
Mhm.
like fasting from certain things and having proper set and
The
setting. And
dieta.
yeah, you need to have the full Monty prepared
Mhm.
before you dive in and unload your mind because this thing is it's freaky
Loaded.
inside. It's loaded. And yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great word.
Yeah.
It's loaded. And it's when you're entering that plant medicine realm, once you've swallowed, you're all in no matter what you
You're
feel
committed.
afterwards, right? And
Yeah.
there's no medicine on earth. Doesn't matter if they take you to the emergency room. You're in, you're
You're
locked in
in.
until
Yeah.
it's over. And
Yeah.
so you darn well better be prepared. So let that be a warning to anybody who's
Mhm.
listening. I'm not advocating for this. I
Mhm.
think that it has its place and it is a powerful tool for assisting people, but it needs to be done properly. It's probably
Yes.
supposed to be done under the supervision and care of
Yeah.
a
Specialist.
professional.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I did a
So
psilocybe journey as well. And I had 2 facilitators, one on each side of me,
Good. Yeah.
so that I could go in deep and process the stuff that I needed out of my psyche. Right. So I had a very safe and sacred container where I was, in good hands. But recreational, I don't recommend it. I just don't. Not if you're
Same.
not if you're ready to do the work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
But it's
when I
like
was-
anything, right? It's anything
Mhm.
you abuse, right? Like,
Yes.
because I mean, when I listen to your podcast, and that's kind of I take the input on the person, but addiction is something that it's an exit. You're using it as exit, right? So
Yeah.
now if we're using it as a medication, right, or a way of healing, it's totally different. Then the addiction is not the same.
Mhm.
I strongly believe that even a glass of wine a day is addiction, because if you need that glass daily, it's an addiction.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're an alcoholic, but it is an addiction. There's two different things here. Now, just to close the safety side for the podcast, just get someone who's professional in it, right?
Mhm.
Don't do it on your own, period. That's all I'm going to throw, because we are shared on platform where there's a lot of actually people who suffer from mental illness, injury.
Mhm.
And for that reason, I mean, even under control, right? You just said it. You can go deep and vary in multiple color. I've heard about psilocybin where it lasts 20 minutes, right? When it's in the hospital and the microdosing. And if they get lost within, it's a long 2 hours instead of 20 minutes. So
oh,
yeah.
try 7 hours.
Yeah.
Try
Yeah,
7
that's-
or 8 hours. I've been.
Yeah.
there.
I'm throwing numbers here, right? But
Yeah.
there's pain that you can inflict to yourself that could be skipped. And if your life is already hard, skip those hard time that you can control, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
true.
And it does go into the psyche, right? Like since I've done those journeys, I've actually had repressed memories come out, which were very painful for me to face. So if I didn't have the proper integration, which is like, the therapy after the fact, because I highly recommend that too. Like, don't just go in there head first and peel your layers back and get to the stinky parts and then go back into your regular everyday life. Like, that's difficult. Right. So
Yeah, well-
integration is key. And that's kind of actually where I want to take my practice as well, is plant medicine integration counselor.
Oh, wow. That's
Mhm.
pretty impressive. And you noted in your bio, and I think this is incredible. So I want you, I don't want to say the words, but I'm going to ask you.
Sure.
I have a quote here that says, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. And that's a quote from Carl Jung.
Yes. Love Carl Jung.
Tell me what that means to you, Rhonda, because
Mhm.
I know you've done some shadow work.
Mhm.
And I know that you express a real deep empathy now. So
Yes.
what does this mean to you, to know your darkness, to see the darkness of others?
Well, I just recently made a bit of a quote from this gentleman that we interviewed the other day on a leadership huddle. And he said, you don't have to walk in somebody's shoes in order to see the blisters. And that's kind of like what that shadow work is, right? Like, in order for me to understand your shadow, I can't just preach it from a textbook. I mean, I guess I could. However, I think that I'm going to reach you at a deeper level if I can kind of say in the back of my mind, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And even though we might have shared different experiences, but just going into that darkness, like that soul sickness or whatever it might be, it just helps you relate. I mean, if you were going to see a therapist, you want somebody that's kind of been down that road, or just somebody who's an academic. And I'm not discrediting anybody by any means. That's my own personal opinion. I would want to go see somebody that's kind of had that lifestyle that's similar.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why there's therapists that are specialized, right? I mean, I wouldn't sit with my load with someone who just got out of school. They're gonna be broken before I end up being fine.
For
You know what I
sure.
mean? Like, and there's specialists for, and this is the beauty in it, is they can specialize. Because I don't think that someone who's specialized in adulthood per se will be a perfect fit for kid, right? And so on and so forth, right? Because there's things that are not, and related to what you just said, 100%. I mean, we can see a bunch of people, but we will feel the person who's in front of us actually gets it.
Yeah, for
because
sure.
it is so transparent when you become vulnerable, that you see the transparency of the other person.
Yeah. Yeah. And to understand that shadow too, like I love the works of Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell and, and all of that, because they really get into like, even like just say the archetypes,
Mhm.
right? I mean, you can go anywhere in the world and not speak the language and still identify with somebody with an archetype. We've all experienced an archetype, and the polarity of an archetype too. Like there's the trickster that can be fun and playful and joking around. And then there's the trickster that's kind of got that shadow side.
Yeah, the
Who's a
dark
little bit,
trickster almost.
yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of navigates a little shady or whatever. So, I mean, understanding that we have that in all of us, then you can understand a person and where they're coming from a little bit more too. Right. Because
And
people, places, and things, a trigger can put us all into some sort of shadow.
Oh yeah.
Yep. And you love the spiritual side of this, and so do I. And I think that there is an energy associated with empathy. And I don't think you can fake empathy, because I've encountered people who are what I call benevolent narcissists. And
I've met them.
I see right through them.
Yeah.
They're just so shallow and empty. It's like when they speak, there's nothing that's coming forward to tell you there's a representation of real empathy there. It's like the wind blowing, but nothing energetic about it. You know what I mean? So when you're talking about energies, I think that there's something wrapped up in those that have experienced trauma or who have lived a hard road, and they can come forward with a deep empathy because they're giving off an energy. There's some sort of connection. There must be, in order for those of us. And here's what I'm getting at. The most empathetic and the most compassionate people that I know are the ones who've been broken the most, or the ones whose life almost broke them.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And perhaps that's something that you can see in yourself. And I'm not saying that you're broken. And I'm not judging you.
I was. No, you can say it.
Yeah. Well, misguided at minimum, but
broken, misguided. It's all, I get it. But the thing is though, Jason, with empathy, I actually had to learn that. Because I came from an environment where emotions were seen as a weakness. And if you showed emotions, they would look at you like you were the weakest link. It actually put my life in danger, because sometimes I would express that. And I was told, they looked me dead straight in the eye and said, you know what, Rhonda, you take your emotion out of it. So, you start to dehumanize people, depersonalize them, dehumanize them, rationalize about why you're doing that. And it was terrible. It's a soul sickness again. I'll keep saying that. So once I healed from all of that, then I had a really deep empathy for people. But then there was also a huge amount of shame that I carried, because I had lived a life of no empathy and just treated people. I dehumanized people, like selling them drugs and putting their lives in, like just terrible things. And so when I healed those parts of myself, yes, now I have the deepest empathy for people.
It's funny because before we started to record, you said that there's more and more uniform around you, not for your past, just for what you're doing now. But what you just started by saying, you dehumanize people. And there's a good reason for this. First thing first, if you do business decision, feelings has no reason to be in there. If you have a violent business, feeling has no reason, because then violence is hard to input, and so on and so forth. But the same description you just give match perfectly for military and policing.
Yes. And I think, somebody told me long time ago, and not that I believe in psychics, because I do believe that there's a lot of power of suggestion. However, there was one that told me one time that when they're doing a reading, that energy between like a crime boss and somebody that's high in law enforcement or military, they actually couldn't tell the difference.
But see, when we joined the military, we would say that we were the closest to a convict.
Yeah,
our salary is crap, right?
Yeah.
We have
war strategies.
Yeah, and
it's
we
tactics.
Have no freedom, right? Yeah. Like I mean, Jason, you work as a cop by all means, but I was not allowed to leave the base without a leave pass. right? On the weekend. So I cannot go outside of whatever, like 45 kilometers if I don't have a leave pass. It has to be approved, right? So they would have fun if it's Quebec Day and we live in Ontario, right? So everyone would have Canada Day off, and you have the choice when you live in Ontario to get the Quebec Day off, right? Saint Jean Baptiste, and the English guys would just shred them. Fuck the those Quebecers. Ooh, I just swear. But
we got a little bit editing.
there we go. I'm getting excited.
Just get all the F-bombs out of it right now. Everybody say fuck
but
once, and then we're
let's
good.
go back to that though, like with that energy that you're talking about, right? Because even in law enforcement, military, and crime, when you kind of get spit out the other end of that, there's a deep moral wounding. Because whether or not you're over in a country fighting a war that, what the F are we even over there for? Really? Like what is the purpose of war, and why do we do this to humanity? It's no different when I sold drugs to humanity. Why are we hurting these people?
Your feeling is not happening as you're doing it. The feeling happened when you remove that uniform, whatever it is, right? That is crimes, that is military uniform, whatever that is when you're saying, wait, I'm going to remove this. And then I can look at what I've done and I'm like, Jesus, now I have feelings and I can look into it, and that's wrong, right.
That's where the trauma is.
Yeah,
it's always in the rearview mirror, Rhonda. Trauma is always in the rearview mirror, right?
Yeah. And even in law enforcement too, like even, you're trying to make the world a better place, but there's got to be a shift, a time when you just look at humanity and say, God, like what a piece of shit. Like this person is a piece of shit. Look at what they're doing to their own fellow humans. And then you start to depersonalize or dehumanize people, right? Because it's repeat offenders, the same loser that keeps repeating the same crime or beating up his girlfriend every weekend. Like I can't even imagine the atrocities that you're exposed to.
But you got to remove that. Because you cannot have, this is the thing, right? So let's say you work for, you have a case of a rape. You're gonna have to hear the entire rape, as if you don't have a sex crimes unit, or if they don't want to take the thing because it's not a big profile, it's the same thing, right? So you need to remove feelings, because if not, you bring them home, and then you don't want to bring that home. I was talking to a friend who was in correction, and he was working in sex offender correction, and he's the guy who was screening them, not seeing them, just reading the file and say, okay, you're going to go there, and so on. And he told me, he's like, I thought it would be totally fine because he's extremely stoic and so on and so forth. But he's like, then my parents came to visit me, and I didn't let my dad touch my little daughter. My dad, it was his dad. He's like, you don't touch it, because he had read a story where the grandfather had raped the children, sorry. And it kind of makes sense, right? Like you bring it home. There's no way, I think, to not bring it home. The question then is when it's going to pop up, because it's going to come.
Yes, exactly. And that's like vicarious trauma. You can get vicarious trauma just through reading files. If you're constantly exposed to files, that is enough, or even just hearing the stories.
Yeah. There's something interesting that I've heard throughout my entire 19 years as a police officer, and Rhonda, you'll get a kick out of this because you might have heard something similar. The difference between the cop and the criminal is one gets caught and one doesn't.
Yeah.
One's allowed to and one isn't.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I heard that. Rhonda, Jon will know this too, and every police officer that listens to this will understand. You get so sick of people.
Yeah.
Because you lose your connection to them.
You lose the empathy.
Right. And you said it when I asked that you had to drop all your emotions at the door, or it was your life, right?
Yes.
You're doing things where your boss is going to just do away with you. So what choice do you have? In the policing world, it's a little different, but you still have to excuse yourself from emotions. And this is a tangent line that I'm not going to exercise right now, but I think that's one of the main problems with policing in 21st century is check your bags at the door and leave your empathy behind, because there's not enough police officers. The call volume is excessively high. So you're just putting band-aids on everything and putting fires out, and there's no opportunity for empathy. And I really struggled the last 10 years of my career. One of the problems that set me apart from a lot of my colleagues was I tried with everything I had to exercise empathy, because I was so hurt myself. I was
Yeah.
dealing with so much of my own pain that at least while I was dealing with my own pain, I started to sense that I didn't want anybody else to hurt. So at least I was, call it lucky enough to have found that. But that's there's no difference between organized crime and a life in the military or the police other than what the rules say about who's right and who's wrong. Now, murder is wrong. You don't need to be a police officer or in organized crime to know that. But I'm talking about all the gray area in between, all of the hard yeses and hard nos. That's where we all kind of operate.
Yeah.
And we learn all the same lessons.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really interesting that you mentioned that too, about how there's like a very fine line there between the crime and the law enforcement and whatnot. Because one time in interrogation, I was being interrogated by an undercover, and he was actually trying to explain to me about the nervous system. And I didn't really realize it then, but now I look back on that and I'm like, dang, I wish I knew that guy's name, because I seriously would look for him to thank him, because he really did make a difference in my life, even though he planted a seed is what it was. And he basically said, you're running from us and we're chasing the bad guy, but the energy is the same. Our nervous system is completely dysregulated. We're chasing this adrenaline. I'm hiding, he's chasing, and it totally made sense to me. Right. And so just from that alone, I realized how close those energies are, whether you're running or chasing, it's still that same feeling. Our nervous system doesn't know the difference, actually.
Yeah. Jon, you grab the mic. That's when you're ready to talk, buddy. So give her.
No, it's I'm trying to not move my hands when I speak or think. This is where I'm at right now. I am taking notes, so I'm taking notes. It's gonna come.
Well, I'll just add something to that, because anxiety can be stressful and painful, or it can be exciting. And what you're exactly right, Rhonda. The cortisol system, the one that sort of ignites anxiety in us to either get us moving for good or get us moving for safety reasons.
Exactly.
The nuance is in whether it's good or bad, eh? And I don't even know if we know why the nuance is there, or how you trigger one to be good or one to be bad. It must be a whole host of things, but you're absolutely right. Your body doesn't know the difference between going to the store for a chocolate cake or being chased by a grizzly bear. It's the exact same chemical process in your body, and yet one is awesome because one's chocolate cake, which is awesome, and one is getting eaten and pooped out.
Yeah, well, the grizzly bear will just help me get there faster.
Yeah, maybe you'll get to the chocolate cake quicker, right?
Yeah, it's so true though, and the thing is, just recently I've actually started consulting with an ex-military guy who's now a therapist. He was a 20-year combat soldier, and his two main modalities when he's working with either veterans or people who are still in the military and law enforcement, and he works with corrections as well, is how to recalibrate your nervous system in the moment. Because that's the thing, is that he's teaching somatics, breath work, and how to regulate the nervous system. Now, if we could learn this as children, so that when we go through these traumas and we learned we taught our children how to regulate their nervous systems, we could probably stop the problem right where it's at.
Yeah, you're right.
Maybe that I shouldn't say it that way, because we can't stop the abuse. We can try, but sometimes it's just, kids just have a lifetime of this. And the resources are so flooded, it's hard to get to everybody. And that's unfortunate. It breaks my heart. However, if we taught this stuff in schools, I think that there would be less violence, maybe even less bullying, who knows, because everybody's just dysregulated. They're out there with dysregulated nervous systems.
Well,
bouncing off of each other.
I think yes, DBT should be taught. Right. I think that's what you're talking about, right? DBT.
Absolutely. DBT. Well, DBT has like grounding and breath work incorporated into it.
Mindfulness. It has, the mindset
CBT,
equivalents.
DBT. Yeah, those are two of my favorite modalities as well. However, my favorite is somatics. Because a lot of this stuff we cannot think our way out of.
Tell us more about somatics then, Rhonda, because I know I have a basic understanding of what somatic means, but for those that are listening that don't understand what this means about movement in the body and stuff, tell us about somatics and why it's so helpful.
Well, like soma is Greek for body.
Yep.
So, and I mean, it's kind of hard to explain. I'd have to go down some really deep rabbit holes, but basically any type of emotion that we experience or express has a charge. So
Yep.
if we're not allowed to like expel that or emote that, it gets trapped in the body, which then can manifest into physical pain, right? Heart problems, stiffness, neck, jaw problems, like going to manifest all types of physical ailments. So the thing is, we don't think our way out of this stuff. This stuff stays trapped in the body, and we may not we're not really aware of it. So what I do is I get people more in touch with their bodies. So like if you start to recognize that there's some tension happening with a grounding exercise, I'll be like, okay, where do you feel that tension right now? And you're like, oh, actually, I feel a little bit of tension in my chest. Okay, well, we stop there. We become presence. We breathe into it. And you ask yourself, what does that actually need right now? And I know it seems a little bit woo-woo, but it works. It works every time. So when you ask somebody, what do you think that tension needs right now? And they'll think about it. And then you can tell they're in their head because they can't really come up with an answer. And you just make them sit there, breathe some more, breathe and keep focusing in on that area. And then eventually something will come to them and they'll be like, I think I just need some nurturing, or I need a walk, or I need a hot
hug.
bath, or does that make sense?
Yeah, you sound like Bessel van der Kolk.
It's
The
really
body keeps
hard
the
to
score, right?
explain because it's not cognitive, it's in the body, right? And then movement. So whenever I'm feeling stressed out or feeling overwhelmed, I will immediately start to move. And qigong is one. Is it great? Stretching, just going for a nature walk,
Yep.
some kind of movement to get that energy. Like in order to replace negative stagnant energy, which creates the blocks, creates the anxiety, it has to be replaced with something greater than.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've spoken about it in a similar way, and I'll say it my way just to as a way of understanding for some people. The energy that we keep, the negative energy that we hold on to because we haven't expressed it, it's kind of like leftovers in your fridge.
There you go. I love that. Yes.
Right? So you can keep leftovers for a few days. Maybe you can get away with it for a week, but eventually, if you open that leftover container, it's going to be moldy and rotten and disgusting. And energy in our body is the same way.
Same way.
So, and how many of us, like almost every human being I know, has decades worth of bull behind them that they haven't dealt with.
Yeah.
So you're carting around a fridge full of rotten leftovers.
Yeah.
And when you have to open them up later in life, it's terrible. It's disgusting because it stinks to high heaven. Versus if you deal with it at the time, then it's not going to reside somewhere in your body. And Jon and I both know, we've learned this through our training with PTSD, that you hold trauma, you hold all this energetic pain somewhere in your body, and it manifests as all kinds of things, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you sit there and clench your jaw for 12 hours a day for 7 days a week and tell me that you're not going to get some pain from that, you're either going to get a migraine headache or some neck problems that are going to like radiate down into your shoulders. So you said it, like it's a residual energy that's going to manifest into physical pain. And one thing, I'm glad you brought this up, because especially for men, when they have anger, and I don't know if you've ever seen the anger iceberg with all the underlying emotions that actually are below the surface level of anger. You're going to see like shame, overwhelm, sadness, grief, whatever it is. Now, men, when they express anger, it's usually not accepted. It's inappropriate. People get triggered. They walk on eggshells. They get scared. They don't know how to react to it.
Oh, you toxic.
Respond to it. Right. So when a man shows anger, everybody's like, oh my God. So therefore, now he's going to start capping it. He's not going to express his anger. So what happens is it gets suppressed in the body, keeps going down. And then all of a sudden the chips are going to stack, and they're going to stack until the volcano blows. And now everybody's now everybody's like, running for their lives. And then there's a lot of shame and guilt because of that, because he's like, oh my God, I lost control, might have broke something, might have punched a hole in the wall or whatever it is. So for men, I think it's really important that we have a safe and what's the word, like a therapeutic space where you can go in and express that anger and process it and get it out of the body. And I don't know if you've ever heard of a therapeutic release session, a TRS.
Mm-mm.
Oh, wow. I've been introduced to a new modality of therapy. Well, new for me. And I would have to say I kind of want to specialize in this. So basically what it is like you do a reenactment, and there's even players that come in that could be your father, or your mother, or the bully that you needed to say something to all these years, or whatever it is. But all of those things that you've suppressed in the body, now we're going to we're going to express it fully. And my last TRS, I actually got to beat the crap out of a punching bag with a rolled up yoga mat so nobody gets hurt or I don't hurt myself. And then there was a player that came in that had these statements that were said to me that either I've said to myself over the years or things that were said to me as a child that I've never really gotten over. So it is such a profound modality. I'm just like, wow. But thing is, you would probably not want to do that with somebody that's actually trained to kill, like someone in the military, because that could open up a can of worms and it could go south real fast.
Yeah, especially if there's some human actors in there.
Well, yeah. And the guy that I'm consulting with right now, he actually specializes in that modality of healing.
Cool. I've never heard that one. John, have you heard that one?
No, but we did something because I went to the OSI clinic, which is for our CMP and military only, or veterans. And what you were saying here was kind of touched somewhere. Like I was not physically, he put me some exercise, but it was not like punching things. He made me hold things.
Okay.
Until and going through two different vision, if you wish. One being all right, like you're going on a call, you're with a person and they need you, and he piled. I remember yesterday, like it was yesterday, he started with a book, right? And so I hold the book, and every time he would say, please do not punch me, and I was like, why would I punch you? right Why? Like, you're my therapist, I respect you, you know, it's kind of the exchange. I ended up with the garbage can, everything on. There's like 12 paper, and he would get everything until my arms just give up, right? And I burst out of tears, and I was like, he's like, what's going on? And I'm like, nobody left behind. We don't leave anyone behind us if it goes to shit. And then he went on for the second turn, and it was same thing. He's like, now I'm your police service. And it took me 2 seconds, and I said, fuck you. And I was done. Another beep that's going to come up. But it was very interesting because it opened the eyes on, okay, this is important. The values that you have versus work is totally different things, and you need to make the difference. And I think it touched a bit what you've done. It was not physical, but I do remember, yes, like.
But it is still physical though, right? Because you were kind of under this, like you were holding the weight.
That trance. Yeah. There's a trance.
And that's why it's connecting mind to body. So you're like, you're physically exerting yourself. Like, even though you're not punching a punching bag, you're still physically exerting yourself, which is helping that energy cycle through.
And what you mentioned, I think every person who goes to therapy basically should actually be in touch with what they feel, right? Like, and most therapists will ask you, and if you're sitting on a chair that you're doing EMDR, CBT, RTMS, name it, right? Any your body will speak first,
yes,
and will be translated later on with your mind. But as you go through your traumas, if they go out, they usually will go out by your head, your feet, your hands. Those are the extremities. It's not going in your chest and being done. If it's in your chest, it's because it's heavy. It's because you're carrying it, right? Yeah. And it's quite important because your chest is where your organs, vital organs, are, right? So and people don't make the connection quite often, right? I need to be in shape for what I look like. Well, you need to be in shape for your health. So we kind of, and it goes back to the same thing you were talking. I think we're at now 50 minutes back, but You were talking about the big truck, the big things, the big this, and the money flowing.
Mhm.
It's all external, right?
External. Yeah.
And we forget that the internal is what should be our principal thing.
Yeah.
And by all means, keeping a very healthy body. But if inside of you is not alive, it's going to rot.
Absolutely.
And then it
Yeah.
goes back to the image that Jason gave with the fridge. Now I want to check your fridge, Jason, if I come visit.
Yeah. You know, and
Mhm.
addictions, like people like look at addictions as just being like drugs or alcohol, right? But addictions are like retail therapy,
Sex.
food, sex, right? There's so many. You can even be addicted to being busy, being busy. Like now that I'm on this journey of being a therapist, I see so many people that are avoiding doing the deep work, that they will do anything to avoid it. And that could be just like you said, you know, like with the neurodivergent, the OCD stuff, you know, like stuff like that. They just hyper focus on things to avoid that, which then eventually, you know, a repetitive thought can become a mood.
Mhm.
And then a repetitive mood creates a personality. It's all about the neurology in our brain. When we wire our brains to be a certain way, we will grow up into adulthood with those little quirks and, you know, tweaks and whatnot. So yeah, like get
In
to
the
the
same,
reason.
yeah, the same way you're saying, right? Like
Mhm.
if you keep telling yourself, and I was in a group yesterday, a DBT group,
Mhm.
and it's super interesting because it's a civilian one. I usually just go to military, veterans, first
Mhm.
responder for the safety of the people I sit with. And just so I can actually open and not traumatize people, right?
Mhm.
And I'm sitting across a young girl in her 20s, and I mentioned war. That for me right now, World War III is a big thing, and it kind of
Mhm.
freaks me out a little bit. But
Freaks
hey,
me out too. Mhm.
I have PTSD. They won't call me back, so it's fine. But and she started to cry. The word
Mm.
war broke her down, right? Never had experience and so on and so forth. And when it was time for her to speak about her week and so on, she's like, we cannot do anything. And I think sometimes this is also the problem is we don't see any ways where we can change things, right?
Mhm.
We can complain about racism, but if you're a racist yourself, you're not helping, right? So you have to
Yeah.
change yourself. We can complain about not having a good job, but if you stick in it, you're not helping your case. You're kind of
Yeah.
the reason why it's not a great life for you, and so on and so forth, right? So I think quite often we forget that we can have control in our own life, and we have to let go of what we don't have control, because it's going to burn our energy like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah.
I dislike what's going on in our country at this moment, but sadly, one person cannot stand up and say it's enough. We have to be a ton of people,
Yeah.
a small minority, fringe minority. I'm just gonna throw that because I find that funny. Anyways, but all of
Mhm.
that to say, right? Like we have the choice, but first thing first, to change outside, you need to change inside.
I totally agree. You know, and that's even like part of being a therapist. The
Mhm.
program that I'm actually in is 50% academic, but 50% experiential. So I personally have had to try on all of these modalities. How am I supposed to walk you through that if I haven't directly experienced it myself?
Yeah.
Right. And I also have to check my biases at the door.
Mm.
And we have a lot of them. And I love like what Jon just said. It's so true. Like, how can we go out there and make a difference in the world if we're still got a fridge full of rotten food?
Yeah, absolutely. So Jon and I recorded recently an episode about this. So I want you to talk about this.
Mm.
When did you find that personal responsibility was going to be the thing that got you out of all of this hell that you put yourself into? Because
Mm.
that is that's sort of like the thing that breaks everybody is taking on personal responsibility means cleaning out your fridge of all the rotten food. And who wants to do that job?
Yeah.
Especially when it's rancid and disgusting. And I love this analogy, this metaphor. I've talked about it a while, but
Mhm.
where did it happen? What was it? And how did you finally decide that personal responsibility was the thing that was going to help you?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I really can't find where that actually happened. But however, you just have to realize that, you know, everything that happens in your life is your own fault, whether it's good or bad. Like you are responsible for that. You can't blame your parents. You know, that's got to stop eventually. you know, especially as you get older and go out into the world. You know, you got to look at your environment. How am I supposed to get better? Or how am I supposed to get healthier in an environment that still makes me sick? Right. So I had to take responsibility in a way of like really taking a good hard look at the inventory of my life. Right. Whose fault is that? Maybe it was because I couldn't say no to someone. I didn't have clear boundaries, you know, or I'm still repeating the same mistakes. I'm still dating the same people. Like eventually you just look at your life and go, this is not working. Like this, you know, and I think actually that's probably where the realization came, is that I am tired of living like this.
Mhm.
One step forward, two steps back, 1 foot forward, two steps back. Well, who's standing in my own way? Me. Right. But it took years to actually realize that. And then taking the responsibility is huge, huge. It's not just admitting it, it's now taking the action steps to make it different.
It's
Yeah,
being in a
big time.
toxic domestic relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, Jason, you say the same thing when you attended any violent
Mhm.
domestic. I would say to the lady or the men, because 33% in Canada of the men in relationship are getting abused.
Yeah.
I would say just walk away, and you would come back how many times to the same house, right? But it's because they get comfortable in that comfortable zone,
Mhm.
in that toxic zone where they know they're gonna get punched or receive a plate or whatever the hell maybe at that point.
Mhm.
But you know, I heard you on other podcasts and you talked about I cannot say that word. Jason, help me. Compartmentalizing. No, I cannot say it
Oh,
properly.
compartmentalizing.
Compartmentalizing.
Bingo. And as therapists, right? You talk.
Mhm.
We'll talk about our Tupperware or whatever we put
Mhm.
our trauma when we walk away from our therapy. What was like yours, right? Because we can all build it, and I think we all have an image, a creation in our head. Can be a bunker, can be a sewer, can be a house, can be a
Mhm.
small Tupperware. What was yours that you put all your baggage in at the end of sitting down to heal?
What did I put all my baggage into?
Mhm.
Um, I'm not too sure. Like that's a bit of a tricky question.
It is.
Yeah.
I think I know what
Um,
you put your. I think I know what you did with it, but I'm gonna wait until you sit in your chair and squirm for a second.
yeah. Well, I think I put all my baggage into like I lumped it into like this life experience. Right? I lumped it into this life experience and like, well, okay, what am I going to do with this life experience now? Like I can either sit here in the muck, right? In the shame and feel bad about myself and just, you know, punch the time clock and just get through this life. Or I can put a purpose and meaning into that baggage and make it work for me now. Right.
Recycle.
So, yeah.
Mhm.
So I turned it into my superpower because let me tell you, telling my story, especially in front of law enforcement, like that's not easy. That's not an easy thing to do. But I do realize that now, in order for me to do the work that I'm doing, my story is like the superpower. Like that's what's fueling me forward. So is that kind of the where that
Yep.
question was going?
Yeah. We don't
You
see what
can't
you're
see it.
writing.
It's. I
You
know.
need to have a
Yeah.
marker, man, or something.
I was
Yeah.
waiting for you to tell me your why.
Yeah. And you know, and the why, like, and the why can't be about like family. I mean, yes, of course it is, but it has to start with you yourself.
Yes.
Because
Mhm.
you're not going to do anything for anybody until you fill your cup. And I always tell my clients that because my clients, a lot of them, they're people pleasers, they have no boundaries, and they're feeling really resentful. And I'm like, well, what's your why? What is your why? Why do you want to get in shape? Oh, it's to look good. Well, that's not a good enough why. That's just
Yep.
not a good enough why. So my why was that I wanted to become a better person, more spiritually aligned, connection to source, right? And now I can guide people down this path like side by side, walking beside them.
You know what's cool, Rhonda, is I caught something earlier in the episode.
Mhm,
I just wanted to say something about what you said though. It's
mhm.
people would rather smile in hell than frown in heaven. And
Mm,
that's why people won't take personal responsibility, right? Because
yeah.
John said that they're more comfortable being uncomfortable, right?
Oh, I
But
do have
they're
something
more
to say
comfortable
about that
living in
too.
hell. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, because I was going to mention this earlier, and then I forgot. But the thing is, sometimes it's all about that familiarity too. We gravitate toward what feels familiar. So if we're in a life of chaos and that's all we've ever known, then that's all we're ever going to be. Until we recognize that about ourselves, we're not going to get out of that feedback loop, that repetitive, like doing the same things over and over and over again, because that's what our nervous system knows.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
and that's why, like, that the domestic dispute, why she goes back, because she doesn't know anything different. She's on this roller coaster, the highs and the lows. It's how her childhood looked. It's how all of her relationships looked. And now if she got into a relationship that was actually like a flat line, it was really good for her, she would like subconsciously create havoc in order to make it go like this again.
Yep.
The fear of the unknown.
Yep. The unknown is a very scary place.
So
And
exciting.
We have a comfort zone. It's just like a thermostat. Like we set the thermostat in our house, it gets to a certain temperature, it shuts off. Well, guess what? So do we. We get to a certain level of a comfort zone and we're like, nope, that's good. I'm good right here. I like my old patterns. Thanks.
I find that super interesting as well, because we're mentioning here, we're talking about having our brain, our soul, inner self active constantly. And I've been tapping now on people who have been psychologists the entire life, and what come to their retirement. And I know one at 70 years old doesn't want to think anymore. He's done. Right. And we were talking, me and him, and he's like, now I deliver cucumber and I'm the happiest person in the world. It's not, I don't think that he's simple minded. I think he carried a lot of pain. He worked with incarceration system and so on, men who beat up women and so on and so forth. And men who drove impaired and killed people. And now I don't want to hear a problem.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear TV. I don't want to have the news. I don't want any of it. I want to go outside, look at the water if he has water or whatever it is. And he's like, the people are happy to see me when I give them cucumber. You know what I mean? I find that extremely sane as well. And I think it's important to mention, because it's not always to look for that inner soul. If you are at the point where you need a break, the break.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not a break saying, I'm going to be uncomfortable, I'm taking a break. No. It's, I've done so much right now, I'm going to take a breather. And when I get up, I'm going to run faster. Right. And so on and so forth. But I think it's also important to mention that it is good to take that break. It's good.
Oh, yeah. I have a really deep spiritual practice, because when I talk to people and the problems all day long, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Like I'm exhausted. And sometimes I'm like, holy crap, do I even really want to do this? And I go and put on my meditation music and my chanting, my indigenous drumming or whatever it is. I go out into nature. I do some breath work and really just sit there in nature and not think about anything. It is so nurturing. You just like, it fills the tank back up again. It's so important to have that balance. And if you go one way or the other, there's consequences to that.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
That, you're talking about things that are really important for healing and for betterment and for your life. And what I caught was the moment that you had when you went to church, and I'm not sure if it was just ladies in the church or if there were nuns. I don't know if it was a Catholic church or not, but you said that sort of became a spark or a pivotal moment where you kind of had like the aha moment, like, what the F am I doing with my life? And there's got to be more to this. And you said something like, I think you said something like you felt the poison, or you felt that sickness in you at that moment really quite clearly. People that go through AA mostly succeed because they find God.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you guys are aware of that.
Yes, I am aware of that. Yes.
Yeah. So anybody in AA will probably know this because it's talked about often. And I'm not religious myself and I don't care about this, but human beings seem to need something to be a part of.
Yes.
And you found a family in organized crime. Jon found a family in the military and special forces. Outside of our personal nuclear family, I found a family in the police force. And when that was stripped of me, or when I removed myself from it, whichever way I look at it, there was a void in me. There was an emptiness because I didn't have an ideal to look to. I didn't have something greater than me to move forward for. And
Yeah.
I wonder if you sense this in you. I wonder if you traded because you're deeply spiritual now. And I don't know about your religious beliefs, and that's okay. I know that you probably believe in a hierarchy of gods.
I do. Yeah.
So I caught that when you were talking. So is
Mhm.
this something that you sensed? Do you feel that there was a transition from one ideal to the other, or one thing that you
Yeah.
could be part of?
Well, the experience that I had was at a Pentecostal church, and it
Okay.
was an all black church. I was probably only about three white people in there that day.
Mm.
And they're very animated and very involved, and everybody was like hallelujah, and they were dancing in the aisles, and
Isn't it
there
awesome
was
though?
just really like a charge of super intense emotions.
Mm.
People were crying. I was just like, oh my god, like where am I? And then they called me up to the front. There was a guest evangelist there, and she didn't know me. So I went up to the front, and about eight of these black ladies laid their hands on me and they started praying for me. And that's the thing, is that I couldn't think my way through this. It was something, just this energy that happened. It was a feeling that I can't even put words to. It just is. And I left there just like in absolute bliss. And my friend looked at me and he said, "You know what, Rhonda? Now that you've experienced this, you got to be really careful because there's going to be a spiritual warfare after you." And he goes, "And watch for the signs." And the signs became very evident, like very evident. The synchronicities that happened after that day, there is no mistaking it. I did not imagine it. It
Mhm.
it just is. So then that made me realize and started to believe in something way greater than myself, because there was just no mistaking it. And you could just feel it. It was just reverberating in my soul. Right. And then, I mean, and I didn't just completely change over like after that day, but it planted a seed. And then just after synchronicity, all these things started to happen. Right.
I think you're when there must be something about aligning our energy the proper way
Yes, I agree. Yeah. And the
because
energy in that room that day was like, it was profound.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've had my own experience like that, Rhonda.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like being taking the red pill in the Matrix. It's like once you
Mhm.
see it, you can't unsee it.
Red pill, blue pill.
Yeah. And like
Yeah.
the red pill for me was a bit of a spiritual awakening, which
Mhm.
allowed me to see that I was part of a greater thing, or at least that's
Mhm.
what it felt like to me.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then I realized I didn't need something else because it's all around me.
Mhm.
It's everywhere. The thing that we're a part of is the universe. You can call it God's package, you can call it God's universe, or you can call it universe, or whatever it
Mhm.
is. I don't know honestly, but when I got that little first taste of it, it was like there was something much greater to be part of, to at least know that you're within something bigger than you.
Yeah.
And there was a piece in that I didn't need other things, and I didn't need
Mhm.
a specific ideal group to be a part of because I had this connection to the universe in some way.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I will continuously talk about the spiritual warfare. Even when we think about war, like a lot of people are, really upset about what's going on in the world today.
Mhm.
And I sympathize deeply. However, war has been on this planet since humanity hit the ground running. So, what is the meaning behind it all? It's not about what country it's happening in or who it's happening to or for. It's like, why? Why is it happening? John's getting excited. I can tell his wheels are spinning.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna bring up something. Keep going.
Yes,
I'm
please.
the So I went on a walk, and I don't want to be perfect on timings, and I'm googling it at the same time. So I went on a walk last April with a bunch of Americans. We walked 222 miles, which is
Ooh.
how much is that? 360, I think, something like this, 760 kilometers for raising awareness on mental illness and suicide within the uniform. And I was talking with the guys up front, and it was super interesting because they know their history of a country. There's not a lot of people I find that didn't know the history of their country, right? And he asked me, he's like, "Do you know how many years U.S. has been without conflict?" And I was like, "Why should I know this?" And out of all those years, right? And as an example, because we follow US in every war, right? So I'm going to throw that out to kind of match with Canadians, anyways. 20 years since they've become a country is the amount of year they were not in conflict. So yes, war has been there forever, but not just humans. A pack of wolf will overtake a land. Monkeys, chimps will do the same.
They'll rip each other apart.
And
terrible.
And they're violent. They're extremely strong, right?
So
and
gruesome,
yeah. And they will punished. Their punishment for if they disregard the rules.
They have a
right?
social hierarchy.
Oh God, big time, right?
Yeah.
And they have the alpha, the beta, and so on and so forth, right? Which is extremely interesting. Which we have the same. Now, I think with the years is we kind of lost track of what is the alpha, female and male, right? The leader aspect has kind of been lost to track by whatever fancy stuff. And you can see that with kids nowadays that are raised either by tablets or games versus kids that are thrown outside still and go play in the woods and don't get lost because dinner is at 5:00. But there is a difference, which will come as well with the trauma, because we all gonna have trauma, right? I always said police and military and first responder in general will have trauma, but everyone. There's that say that there's that expression for kids that the first kids, the parents grow up with them, and then the second kids, they parent. And I think it's totally true. And usually the first kid has trauma because it's not always going so well, right? Which is fine. I think
I was the first kid.
So do I. There we go.
Yeah.
We're all in the same basket. But I think the question is, and that's my biggest thing, and as a coach as well, I looked into is how long are you going to wait to ask for help? Because if you wait so long, the damage will be not only there, but imprinted in into your life, into your bones, and so on and so forth. It might not be curable to a certain level. You might be able to just get to a certain step in your life back to. And this is why Jason and I, since I think the beginning of our podcast, we've been pushing for get some help. Don't wait. And if I see a vet who tell me within 3 years I ask for help, freaking great. Like, this is fantastic. I'll give you a medal if I need to, but you're taking care of yourself. I think it's when you start now 10 years, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you have totally lost track of first who you are. So you have to relearn that. Jason and I talked about that, right? We evolve. Trauma changed us, but the person that comes out of it is a total difference from the before, the in between, and the after. And the people will change, resent you, hate you, disown you, whatever it is that we can put negatively. And there will be the one who are generally, new people who are in love with who you became.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us who Rhonda is now versus who Rhonda used to be.
Well, Rhonda is somebody who is spiritually enlightened and has worked through the shadows and is now on a path, a healing path. Like, I want to help others. I want them to experience this, and that it's never too late for anyone, if they start now. I just want to be that person that now can take my story and just make a better place in the world,
Where can we find you?
Well, I'm on Instagram. I'm Coach Rhonda Lynn, coach.rhonda.lynn. And I actually have a booking link there as well. If anybody wants to sign up with me, I'm taking a few spots right now because I am a wellness counselor and I'm also a certified life coach. But I want to get higher education because I want to be able to get through the brick and mortar. I want to go into the organizations, the penitentiaries and stuff like that, and And unfortunately, they're probably going to have to be governed in that sense. So I got to get higher education. Otherwise, I would just take off running now.
We'll talk after. I'll give you what I have.
Yeah.
The contact I have on that one.
So yeah, I guess that's who I am. And I'm going to continue this path as a healer. I actually see myself going to Peru and deepening my knowledge in the medicine as well, because there's been a lot of profound messages with being a medicine woman.
Awesome.
And you have a website, right? Sorry, Jason.
I do. Yeah. It's rhondasawchuk.com. I don't use it a lot because it's kind of geared more towards oil field. But yeah, rhondasawchuk.com. Can definitely check out some stuff there for sure. But Instagram is probably the best way.
We're going to link all of that.
Oh, I love creating content.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you one final thing. Mm-hmm. I don't have it written down here really, but many of us who have made mistakes in life feel like, how do you ever pay penance for the past?
Ooh, that's a good one.
But
I used to beat myself up all the time, right? That, I'd have to pay my dues, karma.
Yeah, but I think you're doing that though.
Well,
I think you're finally paying it forward. And I wanted to commend you. Mm-hmm. When I first met you and came to know you a little bit, it was such a funny contrast to find out that you had a life of organized crime where you were just about incarcerated for some of your life, mm-hmm. to the addiction problems. And then all of a sudden you're advocating for men. And we had Seb Lavoie on here, and he talked about the same thing, that he knows that there are things in his life he's done wrong. And you'll attest to that. Mm-hmm. So are you paying penance or are you paying it forward? I want to know what you think on that.
Well, I would say a little bit of both. However, in order to pay it forward, you do have to start with forgiveness to yourself, self-empathy. Because if you're going to continue to beat yourself up over it and constantly living in shame and constantly paying your dues, if that's what you'll manifest that. You'll never get past that. What you think about, you bring about. So if you keep beating yourself up, you're going to stay down. So awesome. It wasn't until I forgave myself and worked through the shame that now I'm just like, oh, what a weight off my shoulders. Now grab my hand and let's go. We're going through
I love it. Yeah, right on.
Not around it, through the storm. We're going through the storm.
Fulfilling the soul first before anything.
Yep. Well, like they said, you got to put your own mask on first, right, Rhonda?
Yeah, you do.
It's been a freaking honor to have you on here.
Thank you. I'm really glad you guys put the invite out, because you guys speak my language. I love the content that you guys are putting out, both of you. So, and that's what brought us together in the first place. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, we're going to have you back on someday to talk about how your education is going and how your program in the penitentiaries is going, and how you're advocating for mental wellness for men and women, both in the oil patch and involved in crime previously. So
yeah,
our hats off to you for doing what you do. And we really appreciate the red and blue lights that you put on, because we're a couple of coppers talking to the next con. So
yeah,
I had a laugh on that. It was really good, but
put myself honestly in the pressure cooker. It wouldn't be the first time that these were flashing behind me. So
yeah, it's been great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Yeah, for sure.
Don't forget, subscribe, likes, all the things that comes with YouTube and the likes. And you have a question for us for Rhonda, go ahead, send us an email, send us a text, send us, I don't know, a blue lights. But we'll reply as soon as we can. We'll see you through the next episode. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Peace.